Hey everyone, it's Jacob. In 2014, I wrote a book called The Future of Work. And in that book, I created a concept and an image called the evolution of the employee, which looks at how employees are evolving and changing and what organizations need to do to adapt. I actually shared that image on LinkedIn fairly recently and it went completely viral. It got over 1 million views on LinkedIn and thousands of interactions and engagements and comments around the world. In fact, it became so popular that I decided to expand on that concept a little bit and I put together a brand new PDF which goes into more detail looking at what that evolution of the employee looks like and also provides action items for what you and your organization can do to evolve and adapt as a result. So if you want to get access to that PDF, go to thefutureemployee.com. Again, that is thefutureemployee.com.
Someone who built a company will be familiar, but it's this framework that is way too big. So, a mistake I see a lot of people do is that take things from big companies and they just implement it in small companies. That's not a good idea because a lot of those solve for problems that you get once you're like 10,000 employees. So if you implement that when you're like 10, it's just going to be a lot of useless bureaucracy that isn't like solving your problem.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Future of Work. My guest today is Sondre Rasch. He's the co-founder and CEO of SafetyWing. Sondre, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure to be here, Jacob.
So you are from Norway, I understand, and I don't know if you know this or not, but the world chess champion is from Norway, Magnus Carlsen,
right,
who's currently playing his match in Dubai that I am eagerly following. Are you fans or aware of Magnus?
I am aware of Magnus. I am more a member of the public here. I'm not Norway is small, but it's not like a neighbor or anything when I lived in Norway. I live in San Francisco. But I found it very inspiring and awesome to see his chess skills. I did for a while try to practice my online chess, but haven't really gotten that far.
Yeah, he's like a celebrity there now, and he's about to win his next world championship. Hopefully, I don't jinx him. Well, thank you for being a guest today. I mean, we have a lot of fun stuff to talk about, but why don't we first begin with just a little bit of background information about you, and then tell us about SafetyWing.
Yes. So, me, well, I was born in Norway and always interested in entrepreneurship. Started a web hosting company when I was like 14 in my room at home. Had offered 24/7 customer service on my newly acquired mobile phone. Then, became a bit interested in other things. Studied economics, computer science, worked for the government as a policy advisor for the government of Norway.
Wow.
But then I got a bit disenchanted with the kind of world of government and politics. It's slow moving. It's a very big organization. So returned to startups, founded a company called Superside, a freelancer platform. Got into Y Combinator with that. That's why I moved to San Francisco, where I'm currently at. After a couple of years there, we wanted to provide benefits for the freelancers on that platform. Found out nobody built that, and we had this analysis of where the world was going with the internet, and so we thought, well, that's a big problem that's unsolved, and so we set out to do that, to build, with the experience from the government, and a global social safety net was the kind of initial idea, and still is, and eventually something like a country on the internet. So that's how it all started, and now I'm the CEO and co-founder of SafetyWing, which offers health insurance for remote teams and nomads. So we have people all over the world who, you can have a dashboard, you can add employees or contractors in any country, and they can have like benefits on the same plan.
Very cool. And how many employees do you guys have now?
We're 100.
100 people? Very cool. And
Yeah.
Are you all in a headquarters or are you fully remote and spread out all over the world?
Fully remote.
Fully remote. Everybody, all 100 people are fully remote.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm going to have a couple of questions for you about that too, because I'm really interested in leading and building and scaling virtual teams. I'm sure a lot of people are, because so many of us are virtual now. But let's start just kind of high level with just the state of gig work, because I remember years ago, this was a very big topic, right? The state of the gig economy.
Yeah.
And everybody was talking about how this was going to be a big part of the future of work. And then COVID happened, and we got kind of a little sidetracked with the discussions. So what's going on in the world of gig work now? Is it
Right.
growing? What are you seeing there?
Yeah. So it still is, so my previous company was in that sphere, and hence I spent a lot of time digging down there. And many of the customers of SafetyWing, a third, are freelancers, and many of the companies using us do have contractors. So we are adjacent to that market in that way.
Yep.
What my impression is, okay, so a couple of things have happened. So one is what a lot of people used to talk about as freelancing or online freelancing was essentially a subset of remote work,
Yeah.
right? So one is just that the conversation has gotten bigger, and so it is kind of like split out. But now people talk about remote work, and it means just as much just regular full-time employees, right?
Yep.
But that's partly due to the adoption of remote work, which in the beginning was an online freelancing phenomenon predominantly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that has happened. Yeah, online freelancing does continue to grow. I think the last that I saw, it's kind of like 40% yearly. So it is still in a decade-long, transition. For a lot of people, it is the first step into like the online economy. And for companies, I think it continues to be true that being able to use freelancers or freelance pools for the right functions can make your company much more productive and flexible. So I think that's still ascendant in a big way. And part of the reason why we're not talking about it is because part of it has just transformed into a different ways to slice the world, which is remote work, which now everyone is talking about instead.
Yeah, and obviously there's a difference between remote work and gig workers, right? I mean, a lot of, I think, employees who have full-time jobs who are remote, they still keep their benefits, but then there's also a lot of people who are remote who are contractors and freelancers.
Yeah.
Why do you think this is a growing space? Like, what is the appeal for people to move into this gig work environment as opposed to just keeping a regular full-time job?
There are facts up there. It's I remember the top three were flexibility of various versions is the top one, right? So like when I ran that company, the previous one, it's like a key reason is that someone has a life situation or just a preference for more flexibility
Yep.
through their day that a full-time job sometimes can provide, but not necessarily. Which is, some cases it could be that they want to spend time with their kids, or they have some other commitment, like some side project, or start their own startup, like they have some project that they want to kind of make this work around, or studying, or like that's like many of the stories I saw, like why people who are freelance, who want to be perpetually freelance, it's like the freedom and flexibility, is usually pretty high up.
Oh, I mean,
Working on their
I could speak from personal experience. Right? I mean, I have a team of 12 people now that I'm working with. And one of the reasons why I became, and technically I am considered a freelancer because I do a lot of speaking at conferences and advice, lots of different companies that I work with. And for me, yeah, the flexibility was a big part of it, not just in terms of time, but in terms of projects. Having ownership of the things that I create and the things that I build, being able to say no if I want to say no, and not having to deal with a lot of the office politics and bureaucracy that a lot of people have to deal with. And I also found that a lot of people have full-time jobs because of there's this perception that it's a safety net, right? That you will be taken care of.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But the first thing that a company does when the numbers don't add up is they let you go. So
Right.
so there's not it's a myth that having a full-time job is safer than building your own brand. I actually think that building your brand, your own business, that is the safety net, because nobody can take that from you if you're able to do a good job with it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I broadly think this is right, and certainly experienced. When before I started my first company, when I left policy work, I did spend time building my freelance income because I was like anticipating quitting my job, and I had this plan that I would get income by
Yep.
freelancing while working on my startup, right? And I was going to move to a low cost location. That was what I did, and so I did that part time, and I worked to try to find my niche, and I ended up being this like financial writing. I think was like the one I found, and I realized this, which a lot of people freelancers get, which is that it takes a long time to get this like initial like niche customer that we're kind of good at. But then once you do, it's like the demand seems infinite, like very
Yeah.
quickly. Like it goes up, once you get the one, which is like you said, which is that the logic of a company working with a freelancer is very similar to an employee. If it is valuable, you just want more of it, and
Yep.
and now you're on top of that with a relationship. So, but yeah, so I can absolutely see that being a preferable life state perpetually for a lot of people, uh, especially if they tilt in that direction. And you mentioned another one, which I remember was a top one in our surveys, which is working on their passion. Very often people will find that they can get a full-time job, but then they have to make some significant sacrifices in what they work on. Uh, but with freelancing, they can kind of specialize into exactly the kind of work that they truly find the most enjoyable.
Yeah. And again, it's not to make it sound like being an entrepreneur is easy and starting your own business is easy. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges and it's hard work to do that, as I'm sure you and many others can attest to. But if you're able to put in the time and the commitment, just as much as you're putting into somebody else's business, working 8, 9 hours a day into your own, you will find that it is very rewarding, and there is a lot, and there's no income ceiling, right? You're not capped at a certain salary where
Right.
you can only get 2% increases, every year. Okay, so the benefits for individuals is very clear. What's the benefit for organizations? Why are you seeing organizations go with freelancers as opposed to hiring full-time employees?
Yes. So just to clarify one thing, SafetyWing does not offer freelancing services. That was my previous company, so I have only adjacent knowledge on this topic. But I will try my best to say, because I have spent a lot of time talking about it like a few years back. So SafetyWing offers health insurance for remote teams, but uh, why companies might do it? So that's that. Okay, so this is something I think is really struggle to explain it. So there are a set of tasks in a company that is best run as a freelance organization. Uh, some things, in the beginning of my previous company, we actually tried to build a whole company with freelancing because we discovered it. That turned out to be, over the long run, there's some benefits from having some people who are like dedicated and long term and full time. But a lot of tasks, like um, are best run as a freelance pool. But you run those workforces completely differently, right? So it's like you would have many people available, and that gives you this ability to do that. So one concrete example that we in SafetyWing run with freelancers is that we wanted a quick way to get to 24/7 support on our customer service, right? And if we were to do that with full-time employees, I don't know, that's like 20 employees. But we were able to do that very early on in our startup history because we sewn it together, using this the freelance model in a way that still worked very well for the people working there. So that's one example. Another is flexibility of scaling. So I remember when COVID happened, a lot of companies had a lot of things happen, and we did that. Like we had a flow of like customer requests. And they went kind of underwater because they're kind of at capacity.
Yeah.
But when you have a freelancer, you kind of like have more flexible capacity. Whether that is on the design or the development or the marketing customer side, it's like you have more room to grow in the short run because people aren't at max capacity all the time.
Yeah.
And that as an organization makes you much more adaptable. So on the margin, if you have a good freelancing component and you're able to, make use of that at scale, your whole company becomes more likely to survive, I think, long term and adapt to rapid changes.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more. I mean, I have a team of freelancers that I work with, and one of the big draws for me was just being able to find the best talent. I have people that I work with all over the world, and they're all the best at what they do. And if they were all full-time employees and I had to just hire people in Los Angeles, I honestly don't think I would have been able to find people that are as good as the people that I have now. So broadening
Yeah.
that talent pool has been huge for me.
Right.
So you have a team of 100 people that you're working with, and I think there's a lot that people can learn because a lot of us now are in this virtual setting. Can you talk a little bit about how and there's a lot of questions I have, right? How do you build a virtual team? How do you scale a team? How do you lead a virtual
Yeah.
team? How do you get everybody to work together? Let's start with just from a high level of building this virtual team and getting everybody to work together. How were you able to do
Yeah.
that?
So it was very fortunate that I'd done it once before. So I did some lessons because I kind of like in previous company got to like 30 people team, but we actually had also hundreds of freelancers at that point. So, but 30 full time. So that was kind of the scale first time around, and I made some lessons. So some things we did right out of the bat first time around. The second time around, that was super happy I did. So one of them is like meeting cadence and like goals, vision, values. So all of these things I just didn't do in the beginning. One, we didn't have meetings and all this like vision, values, goals. That just seems like a task that took away from like doing the important thing, which is building a product. And there's some truth to that, but it doesn't take that long, and it really removes a lot of future problems and coordination issues and chaos. So yeah, so second time around, from the start, we took half an hour, with just the three founders and wrote down, what's our vision and what's our values, what is the end state we want to get to, and what is important to us, and what's the ideal, where are we now? So and because of that, things have grown much more harmoniously, and we have a much more like pleasant, value focused, mission driven company, which gives it this like long drive. And I think it's a key reason why we have like zero churn. Nobody's ever quit.
Nobody's ever quit your company?
Yeah, who are like full time, and that. So that's been a great thing. And like 9 out of 10 is this score of like, would you recommend working here to a friend? And I think a key reason is likes in this vision values things. We really got that right in how we did that. And another one is goals. We took this like simplified version of OKRs. Someone who built a company would be familiar, but it's this framework that is way too big. So, a mistake I see a lot of people do is they take things from big companies and they just implement it in small companies. That's not a good idea because a lot of those solve for problems that you get once you're like 10,000 employees. So if you implement that when you're like 10, it's just going to be a lot of useless bureaucracy that isn't like solving your problem. So, but we took some of the ideas from that, right? And the ideas from that is that you make a goal sheet, a Google sheet, and this works out of the gate. And then it's like the idea from OKR is you have qualitative goals. So you target at things that are qualitative, not quantitative, meaning make a product people love so much they tell their friends, right? It's not a number in there. And then you have proxies associated with that goal. So under that goal is like, okay, what are some numbers that indicate that we're hitting this goal? Well, NPS. With 1 to 10, would you recommend this product to a friend?
Yep.
Retention, churn, right? Those are measurables. And then you kind of like give each one you assign to a person, and then you update on a monthly basis. Great tool that we set up early on.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So are these goals, so they're business goals, they're not individual goals. So for example, let's say I'm talking to somebody on my team and let's say she helps me manage social media, for example.
Yeah.
Would those goals then be like specific to her, or are they just general business goals that she's trying to meet? Or both, maybe, I don't know.
It would be both.
Okay.
So we also have, but this we did much later, right? So if company history, it's like 0 to 10 is a particular way, 20 to like, around between 20 to 30, there is this transition happening that is quite dramatic, because like before that, and you can kind of stretch it up to 20, although it starts getting awkward around 15. Before that, you can all sit around one table, right? And you can kind of know everyone and know what everyone else is doing. That's possible. That stops being true at around 20 to 30. And then you have to implement a whole set, sorry, I should say, we implemented a whole set of like a reorg to solve for that, for a situation where everyone can't know everything about everyone else. And that's when we set up like these more clear like individual goals. So like making a proper product roadmap. So we have two things: we have goals and product roadmap, and everyone sets like quarterly goals. But one thing we had right from the beginning, from like when we were a three-person team, was weekly goals. So we have like a meeting once a week. Everyone post in a Slack channel, top 3 things they will do next week, and then they also on the last week post like they check off their goals from last week. Okay. And that's a really basic way, but that scales super well for like just getting momentum into the team.
Okay. All right. So I think that's a good lesson also, even for leaders who are leading remote teams, right? I mean, you don't need to be an entrepreneur or a startup founder to be doing this. You could just be leading a team of 30, 40, 50, 100 people and still follow this approach. So I think that's one great lesson. You also said meeting cadence. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, meeting cadence. So cadence, just like, I think that means frequency, but it means when we scale a remote team, this is also a lesson that I did from the first time around. So we went full async first time around, which I wouldn't recommend. I know it's very trendy these days, but people also use async to mean not fully async. But we were fully async, meaning we had 0 meetings in my first company.
Wow. Like, no meetings at all of any kind?
No, 0. Nothing.
Wow.
And for the first couple of years, but that changed.
For years. That sounds like a dream scenario for a lot of people, going years without a meeting.
I mean, it is lovely. Like, there are many upsides to it, but there are some significant downsides. So I didn't do that again second time around.
What were the downsides for you?
Some examples. I mean, but overall, that like the big one is like coordination, cohesiveness.
Yeah.
Coordination, cohesiveness, culture. Like, hard to put your finger on. Not something that happens after one day. But yeah, that's probably like the primary reason. There is also like a smaller reason. Like, there is a subset of issues that are can be solved through a 5-minute conversation. But if you solve it in Slack, it's like 17 walls of text. So there's also that, but that's not like a strong one. But
yeah.
But it's like the culture, cohesiveness, coordination. That's not like a strong one, but we are working with, I think it's a big one. There's this thing that can develop when you're full async, meaning 0 meetings, where everyone starts to feel that they're the only one doing work because they can only see themselves doing work.
Oh, interesting.
So that's that. But the rest of meeting cadence. So let's say you are having meetings, right? And we are. Then you want to schedule them. And in a remote team, I found, and we did, is that you have to schedule things that people can take for granted in a regular on-site situation. So yeah, one thing you want to schedule is, of course, the weekly Monday meeting or whatever it is, the thing where people update on their progress and plan next week. But you also want to schedule in, or we scheduled in, creative meetings and monthly goal updates. So we put all this, the way we did it, we put it all in a Thursday. So there's only 2 like weekly meetings, Monday and Thursday, and 8 to 10 a.m. PST, which is the time zone that works for most people in the world. And there we would have like a set of meetings. So one of them is, for example, a creative meeting called planning and prioritization. This is something we developed, but it's fantastic. It's like you have a goal or a problem, and then people think for themselves, come up with ideas, and then they discuss in small groups, and then we put it all into like a Google sheet, which we fill in like together, and people vote anonymously on all the ideas, 1 to 10, on effect and complexity. And then the output becomes like a prioritized list, which is, for example, whoever needs the ideas, like if it's marketing, right, can just take. And it's really great, and allows and it scales. Actually, that particular meeting works when you're 5, and it works when you're 100. So that allows everyone. It's a great way to like produce ideas, and it also allows everyone to participate in the creation of the company. I mentioned monthly goal update. That's another meeting cadence. You have your yearly goals. Have to schedule in some way where you kind of check in. Okay, how are we doing? What are the numbers? What are we going to do to reach our goal next month? Did we do the last things from last month? These things kind of have to be scheduled in. That's what it means to set up a meeting cadence. And we also have one called Dugnad. This one I really love, and I haven't heard anyone else have anything like it. Dugnad is a once a quarter meeting. It comes from a Norwegian concept, which is like volunteer work in the community. And it's essentially everyone comes on and it's like, okay, what of our shared spaces is messy or outdated and need to be fixed up? And then we go and do it, and then we return at the end. So that could be like updating things on Notion, deleting old Slack channels, cleaning out something on Jira, just making sure that we don't get this thing where we just like pile up crap around us, in our digital spaces, but clear them up.
I like that. It's like a regular housekeeping, but in a digital sense. Okay, so those are two, I think, very good and applicable tactics that a lot of remote or that leaders can use for their remote teams. So there's the meeting cadence, there's like the modified version of the OKRs. Were there any other lessons that you learned when it came to building a successful virtual team?
Yeah. Here's one very straightforward one. Test task or trial period, right? A great thing on the internet is, I think, in previous company, I hired like thousands of people. So we got a lot of data on like what worked. And like the most pleasant finding is test task. Test task throughout that remained the number one predictor for performance. So you have someone do a test task that is like real, meaning it's like related to the job they'll actually be doing, or ideally like an example of the job they'll actually be doing. It's measured by whoever is doing it, if you have someone in the company who's already good at it. And boy, this is the facts. Everything else is like indications. This is the facts of how this person will do. Test task. You can also do like a big test task, which then becomes a kind of trial, right? And this is very easy with a freelancer contract, right? So it's like you have someone start and be like, okay, we start doing this particular project, and then if that works out, then you get a full-time offer. Very common. A lot of people would be, even interested in doing that because they also get to trial out your company, and that's a way to make hires more successful. Test task or trial period.
I like that approach. And so instead of just like spending all your time asking interview questions, you give people an actual project or task to do and see how they do it.
Exactly. That's exactly what we do, and that works really well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, I think I don't know if it's like you're interested in the things that are more like vision, mission, product side, but
if you want to share one or two of those, for sure.
Okay, yeah. I mean, having a real vision has been so helpful for SafetyWing, like much more than I expected it to. Right. Of course, we were fortunate in the sense that we started out as a vision, right? We started out by saying we want to build a global social safety net for the country and the internet. And then we found the products after. For some startups, it's the other way around. Like they start with a product and then they develop the vision, and that also works. But having like an inspiring vision becomes like something that solves a whole set of problems you didn't know it solved.
Yeah.
It's the decision metric by which you can say, if something is the right or wrong decision that people can kind of come together on. It's an inspiration that can pull people through tough times, right? It's like you're going to come through some period where things are very stressful and overwhelming, and if you have like a really inspiring mission, it's worth it. it's something cool to talk about to friends, and
Yeah.
like just like people want to work on cool things. So that I find to be, super valuable, and I think as a necessary. Like it's also becoming more important as time goes by. So that's definitely one. I also find to have a design, like having your own style, thinking for yourself. This might be a value conversation, but I think it's kind of true that the internet is pressuring everyone to look the same very much. It's a big social network, obviously. So it's very hard to remain distinctive in brand or product, and very easy to be caught up in like copying others or like trying to compete. But so, we've worked so hard to kind of resist that tug and stay different in how our website looks or what our product is, and that's extremely valuable. That is paid off handsomely. So that's another one that I found very useful.
Hey, it's just a quick reminder to check out my brand new PDF, thefutureemployee.com, which looks at how employees are evolving and changing and what you as an organization need to do to evolve and adapt. You'll get a complete breakdown of what that evolution looks like, as well as action items that you should be taking. It's an invaluable resource, and you can grab it at thefutureemployee.com. Again, that's thefutureemployee.com. And now back to the show. One question that I remember a lot of people would ask is, if you have a remote team, how do you know they're working? And the reason why I ask, I don't know if you saw this, because I think 2 days ago, there was a story that came out about the CEO of better.com. Did you see this story?
I did actually, but I can't remember what it was.
It
But
was,
I remember I went to better.com and I saw it. Oh, yeah. He fired the people.
He was trending on LinkedIn. It was like the number one trending story on LinkedIn. And this guy basically, he called a Zoom meeting for 900 people. And everybody joins this Zoom meeting. And the first thing he says is, if you are on this call, you're one of the unfortunate people who are getting laid off from the company. And he did it right before the holidays, obviously, right before New Year and Christmas and Hanukkah or whatever holiday you're celebrating is coming up. And then he continued and he said, 250 of you have been clocking in 8 hours, but you've really only been working 2, and you've been stealing from the company. And, he's trending now on LinkedIn because everybody's saying, wow, what a jackass to do something like this. But, it does raise an interesting question of, how do you handle situations like this? How do you know if people are working? What's the right etiquette? I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that story? I'd be curious to hear what you think.
Yeah. So I never saw the video, but that makes it so interesting. Now I understand why it's trending so hard. So, okay, yeah, I do actually have a lot of thought on this. It's one of the biggest things I had to, switch, and where I find people be the most wrong when they switch to remote is in this particular. So, okay, so like the mistake that everyone does is apparently what this guy does, but it's also what a lot of people do, and people did early on in freelancing world, which is that they switched to this online freelancing thing, and then they had the question, how do I know if people are working? And then their conclusion was, I'm going to put up some surveillance device on their computer.
Yeah.
Right. And that was like in their, I think Upwork still have this, where they took random screenshots of their screen to see that they're working.
Yeah, and it says what websites you go to, text like keystrokes, all sorts of crazy stuff. It's literally spying on you.
Yeah. So, and then there was like another software, time tracking software, I remember, who has the same, but like even more involved. It was like both, it was the screen capture and the camera, and you can check anytime. And it was just like, it was, so that's, that was one direction people went, which I did not, and most successful companies did not. So what do you do instead? Well, the thing is, if you go another way, you have to go, like, it's like a paradigm shift another way, which is you go from measuring inputs to measuring outputs. And what that means is, you, instead of saying, what keystrokes are there, either typing keystrokes or what's on their screen, you measure Are they reaching their goals? Have they completed the project that we set out to do, right? And then you optimize on that, right? And that can, in a way, be optimized on, but it's difficult, and it's like a long path down. Like, it requires a lot of effort. So, obviously, some of the things I mentioned earlier, the weekly goals update, the monthly goals thing, the product roadmap, all of these things can be connected to names and how we are progressing, right? So it's a way to know that we are achieving our goals and progressing that is traceable, but that is outcome based. So and that's also what you want, right? If you think about how people work, even at an office, right? So everyone has worked at an office. It's, yeah, someone could come and look over your shoulder, but how much of the day are people actually productive? Not that much. Like, it varies. Some people are productive all the time, but my impression was, and I've seen some data to support this, is that it's like 25% of the time or something. You're actually outputting things. And so the great thing when you're working from home is that people can actually be much more productive because they can control their own time, and they can, outside of scheduled meetings, they can go for a walk and then come back and do some work, and that's a good thing. So they can optimize on output. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we did. We go all in on that. So it's full trust. It's like, we're not stipulating work hours. We're just saying, this is your job. Of course, we expect people to do what they can and work the necessary times. But the main thing is, like, are they making reasonable progress in measurable time? But not in, like, are they inputting things in this time, but are they reaching the outputs, which is good for some and bad for some, and a whole change in how a company measures success and progress and performance.
Do you have any suggestions on how to make that shift? Because for a lot of leaders out there who are coming from having teams in person, coming into the office, you see people are working. Now all of a sudden everybody is remote, everyone's virtual. And I know there are a lot of leaders, a lot of employees out there who are just uncomfortable with that. And they're constantly, they try to micromanage. You're like, are you there? Are you working? They look for that little green dot for availability on your screen. And if it's not available, where are you? Like, what's going on? And it suffocates people. So how do you, as a leader, find a way to give up some of that control, to give people that autonomy, to have that level of trust? I would imagine it's not so easy for everybody to do.
Yeah. It's so interesting you would ask, because for me, that world is now so distant that I can, like, scarcely remember it.
Yeah.
But how was it? Well, it's I think it starts with a decision. It's like, yes, I want to switch from measuring inputs to measuring outputs. And then there is, like, this great upside to it. So you kind of go all in on it. I mean, that's what I did. Meaning that you don't go halfway. You don't pretend to still be measuring inputs. You go in a totally opposite direction, and you say, we trust you on, like, on that. Like, you choose when you work and what you do, and designing your whole day is all your responsibility, right? It's not just like your task, but it's like your responsibility. And self-management is very difficult, right? And for everyone to switch to remote, it's like it's a big problem, and it might be hard for you, and that's fine. It's hard for everyone, right? And but the way so the way we measure it is, like, by these goals. So you have to set up these, like, goal systems that's measured, and find some way to tell, are people reaching their goals, and then you have to set up measurements on those again, and it's a whole system that's kind of like bottom up. But it's not like it's a mystery, right? It's not like when I work now, over time, obviously you can tell when someone is doing nothing and someone is doing something.
Yeah.
It's not that much harder when you can see them in the office. But it is a transition, and I do think you just have to take the big step into the unknown. I mean, the fortunate thing is that I did that, like I do with some things, with, like, almost like ideological conviction, right? It was just like, this is the way things should be. And so I didn't, in a way, care. Like, I was like, this is better because I think it is. Right? I was like, because it should be. And now it turned out it was, but I wasn't hedging my bets. So therefore, I'm not sure how much there is to learn from that. But I mean, I guess it's just, you could say that's one possible way. It's just like convince yourself that it is possible to have a collection of, free thinking individuals with a shared purpose and goals, that you trust and that autonomously take responsibility for their area, and that you work collaboratively with them, and you aim at things and you keep each other accountable, but you also roughly forgive things and are, and that's possible to set up, but it's a different structure entirely. So it's like, I can totally see that that's not a small gulf to gap if you're like terrified that and completely devoid of trust, and the only thing that makes you think that anyone would keep any of their promises to you is that because you're literally surveilling them and punishing them rapidly if they don't.
Yeah, you probably have bigger problems in your life that you need to worry about if that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like you don't have a choice, right? I feel like as a leader, this is what you have to do, because this is the world that we're all a part of. And we're talking now a lot about hybrid work, where we're going to see this huge, big mix and blending of virtual and in person. And if you're the type of leader who only thinks people are working if you see them, you're honestly, I mean, how are you going to lead a team like that? You're not going to be able to. So it's out of necessity, part of it. Like, if you don't embrace this new way of working, you're not going to be able to lead teams. It's kind of that simple almost.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's not an option. You have to learn this other way. So yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of people who are maybe listening to this and reflecting of, oh, should I make that switch? That's the only thing that will make them make the switch.
Yeah.
There is literally no other option, and I do think that's probably correct. I mean, can you imagine having a company that was on site is now hybrid, like with new hires being remote? And then they implement this kind of like Orwellian, everything on your camera and screen is recorded all the time. Like, it's like, well, let's look at those retention numbers, and certainly that's not going to be too popular, I think.
Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk specifically about the leadership aspect of leading remote teams, because when you're in person, obviously you can see people, you can talk to people, you can do all hands meetings, you have that physical presence that I think a lot of leaders very much rely on. But when you're in a virtual world, obviously you're looking at screens, you're looking at cameras, little dots, microphones. How do you find it to lead a virtual team? Do you have any suggestions for how to still be an effective leader, motivate, engage, inspire, empower people, even though you can't see them in person?
Yeah. Well, so we use TeamFlow, virtual office software. It's not a big deal, but it helps a little bit. It becomes like a shared physical space. And, a lot of things that you do is the same. You have to over and over again talk about the vision and the goal and why we're doing this, and to give an interpretive lens on what is going on that is motivating and creates momentum, and to make wise strategic choices, and that will lead the company to success, and hire people who want the same thing that you want, and shares the vision and values, because then you don't have to manage them. So those are some of the key highlights, but that's actually not different from remote, from on-site, but it certainly is true. We also have off-sites, 2-3 times a year. That's necessary. We find that to be really good and necessary.
So there's still a place for in-person gatherings, meeting with each other. It's not like you never see each other in person.
Yeah, that's right. We also had virtual offsites, which we will continue to have that we had during COVID, which sounds super cringe, but it actually started to get really good by the end. Uh, that people actually enjoyed. There are also some ways to do all hands and town hall like meetings that we've had a lot of success with. One is this like icebreaker format where you have like prompts and people are paired with random groups of two or three. And we actually do like a light version of that at the beginning of every Monday meeting while people write their weekly goals. That's one very always popular
Okay.
thing. Always get top ratings from people. They enjoy that. Um, Scheduling a town hall. I mean, that's another kind of meeting cadence, but one that we successfully did do in also my previous company and SafetyWing. We put it on a quarterly basis, but you have that meeting where you kind of take slides, you update on how's the company
Yeah.
doing. That's a good reminder to go through vision and values again, maybe. What's the big projects coming up in the next quarter? What have we just done? Celebrating, mention who has done well, who has completed a project, congratulating them, having some other people do some presentations. That's another one that
Okay.
that really works.
All right. And then one question that I always hear about a lot as well is dealing with mental health of virtual teams. So loneliness, people feeling like they're connected.
Right.
Obviously, if you're in person, a lot of that is diminished because you're around other people. But how do you deal with? And I don't know, does anybody in your team ever struggle with this? If you're not around people, how do you get that sense of connection all the time?
We generally, broadly, like don't have that problem, but we have had one or two individuals who have had that problem where because they were working on something in the company where they didn't need to interact with anyone.
Mm.
And then there were the kind of people who didn't particularly prefer that, and as time went by, it was like they felt isolated and lonely. Um, so, I mean, that's one lesson. I think, having someone work on their own project isn't for everyone,
Yeah.
and that's something to pay attention to. I do that a lot in one-on-ones. Like, are you working on what you want to work on? Asking that question and like taking very seriously, what people want and trying to address that like in the organization seems to have been quite necessary.
Okay.
Uh, but when it comes to just like loneliness of working from home versus working in the office, there the transition is actually a different one. It's like a life cycle change, and it goes something like this: someone joins their company and they're like pre-COVID, and they switched from from on-site, and they might be apprehensive. So like take one example was person who worked in San Francisco, regular tech jobs in San Francisco. It was a bit like, I don't know, I've never worked remotely, but okay. And in the beginning, it's kind of like trying to figure out working from home, you know, having that a bit disconnected sense. But the big thing that solves that part, like at home, is actually that is like, oh wait, I can I can just move. And then that was like 6 months in, kind of realized that he could move, and then decided to go in this like live in 12 different states. They ended up buying this lake house and has suddenly become this like living in a rural by a lake somewhere. I think they ended up in South Carolina, and
Wow.
they've built this like social network there. And for other people, it's more nomadic. But the point is that, or moving home to their families. But the point is that once you realize the upside of remote work, being that you are free to move, then you can move to your friends and family, or you can move to where you want to live, or you can move, be nomadic. And
Well,
and
my wife and I
so
actually just moved. We used to be in the Bay Area, not too far from you. We lived in Alameda. I don't know if you know where that is in San
yes,
Francisco. We're right nearby. And during COVID, we noticed all of our friends moved, and literally all of our best friends moved. They moved to Texas. They moved to Colorado. They just vanished, and we
yes,
we were left alone there in the Bay Area. And we're like, why are we still here? It, it
yeah,
was it was getting lonely. It was getting isolating. It was getting depressing. And we're both like, wait a
mhm,
minute. We're both from Southern California. Our families are in Southern California. We still have friends in Southern California. Why don't at
right,
least why don't we move down there? Because at least your family's going to be there. You'll always have that kind of as a home base. And we have
Yeah.
two kids. We have a 18-month-old and a 5-year-old. And so we recently moved back to Southern California in Los Angeles, and it's been fantastic, right? And
Yep.
but that's one of the benefits that you have of being remote or a nomad is you can just realize and do that when you need to.
Absolutely. And that's what we've seen with, a good portion, like a good third of those who move, that's what they do, like back close to
Yeah.
family. And guess what? That reduces their loneliness. I mean, because, you're close to family and friends.
Yep.
That's one of your most important relationships, typically.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess almost always that's the case. So yeah, no, so that's what I think is like the real solution to that is actually to take advantage, the upside of remote work and move.
Well, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so maybe just one more question for you, and that's about the future of work. So when you think about where all this stuff is going, what do you see the future of work looking like over the next coming years, and what might that mean for your business and some of the stuff that you guys are doing?
Yeah. Well, I think that obviously I think remote work transition is continuing. It's gonna, be complete. Every job that can be done remotely will be done remotely. And I think that this moving thing we're talking about
Yep.
will actually cause a bit of a population redistribution. So over the next 5 years, there's going to be, similar to like when the car came and people moved out to the suburbs, there's going to be this like transition period where people are just more open to move. And what I'm seeing from on the frontier of that is, people are starting cities again, people are starting towns, people are starting nomad hotels, remote work villages. All of these things are in founding stages, and when they're started, they're usually extremely popular. So I think that that's like a little glance into the future. That's going to be an interesting time. We see a repopulation of some towns, some particularly picturesque beach towns, mountain towns. I'm sure some lake in South Carolina just got another inhabitant from the Bay Area. And so we're seeing those kind of like an opportunity for smaller cities to resettle. But this is just the beginning times of like a complete population resettling, I think, and that's part of the future of work. We're going to resettle in some state, and it's not going to be what we have now. It's going to be, where do people want to move if they're not constrained by where their job is, and that's not going to be the same. Right now, most people live a place because that's where their job is.
Yep.
Okay, so that's one. Yeah. Oh.
No. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Another one, I think that on the product side, the internet is, I still think the internet's a bigger deal than people even think today, which seems bizarre, but it's like, it seems to me that everything that was made pre-internet has to be remade on the internet.
Yeah.
Every single thing. And, we've gone through a lot. We did the thing with newspapers to blogs, or CDs to streaming, or videos to streaming. There's a lot of things we've done, radio to podcasts, but or TV to podcast, but there's so much left. Like, we were working on the social safety net, but once you got into the harder stuff, insurance, social safety net, government things, contracts, just like look at things you do in your daily life that is like the most sticky, like that's also going to go on the internet. And I think that's where the next round of products, it's like in the hard stuff that's slow and easy and hard to move into the digital space. So that's what I foresee on the digital side, I guess.
Yeah, the future will be very interesting to see all the changes and transformations that happen once we eventually get past all the madness that's going on with COVID. But why don't you let people know where they can learn a little bit more about you, your company, anything that you want to mention for people to check out? Please feel free to do so.
I would, if you're nomadic, you want to go live in Tulum or Lisbon or somewhere for a while.
That sounds great.
That sounds pretty good. Then definitely check out Nomad Insurance. It's $42 a month you have a subscription. It's completely flexible. You can turn it on and off. It covers like your medical and also like other travel insurance related things. Nomad Insurance. So, and if you have a startup and you want to offer benefits for your remote teams, which is in different countries, then we have remote health for that. So you can go there, you get the dashboard, you can add employees and contractors anywhere in the world. It works really well. And lastly, I would say check out buildingremotely.com, where we have a project to make a textbook for building remote companies that we just started. We're on like chapter 2. We're gonna make all the chapters digitally. We also have a podcast there where we interview people. But yeah, our plan is to make all the chapters and then to literally print it as a book and send it out to universities, because it's just there's so little knowledge codified, of the things that we're talking about, that everyone is like on the frontier. Everyone is a new. So yeah, I definitely appreciate the project here, and it seems like you have a lot of knowledge there as well.
Yeah, no, I am quite passionate about this stuff. So thank you very much for being a guest, for joining, for sharing all your insights and stories. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And make sure to check out SafetyWing and some of the resources that Sondre mentioned. And I will see all of you next week. Thanks again for tuning into today's episode. Please remember to rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or whatever your preferred channel is. I cannot express how important those reviews and ratings are to the success of this show, and they keep allowing me to bring back amazing guests. Lastly, don't forget to check out the brand new PDF that I just put out, which looks at the evolution of the employee. In other words, how employees are evolving and changing, and what you as an organization should do to adapt. You'll get a complete breakdown of what that evolution looks like, as well as action items that you can and should be taking. That PDF is available at thefutureemployee.com. And if you want to reach out to me for whatever reason, whether it's inviting me to speak, sponsoring the show, or just giving me some feedback, you can always do so. My email is jacob@thefutureorganization.com. Again, that's jacob@thefutureorganization.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.